Hey, Exiles. So, in case you missed it, this week I interviewed Path of Exile 2 game director Jonathan Rogers on the present state of Path of Exile 2, the future of the game, and what happened between now and the launch of early access. It was full of awesome information. The reception was incredible. I spent the day after listening to reactions from various content creators, reading literally thousands of comments about it, and man, I couldn't be happier with it. And in this video, we're going to break down the interview for those of you who cannot watch the full 90 minutes. And if you would like to, it's going to be linked in this video right now, probably in one of these corners and in the description. We're also going to talk a little bit about my interview style. This right here is the actual sheet with all of my questions in it. These were all the ones that were answered. I had around 53 questions prepared, not including all the follow-ups that I have in this column right here. And we only got to about 40% of them. I wanted to over-prepare. I did. I spent quite a bit of time preparing. I watched all the prior interviews and it really paid off. It ended up being a very productive conversation with a lot of new info. And we're going to start just from the top. The biggest news came in the first 5 minutes of the interview from Jonathan Rogers. Hi, once again, little kitty. And that is the fact that Grinding Gear Games is no longer shipping based on content delivery. They're shipping based on dates. What this means is every 2 months, we will be getting a new update from Grinding Gear Games in Path of Exile 1 and Path of Exile 2 alternating. That means there will be 6 leagues of content per year, 3 for Path of Exile 1 and 3 for Path of Exile 2, with the next update coming for Path of Exile 1 in June, 3.26, and then 2 months later, we will be getting 0.3 for Path of Exile 2. Then 2 months after that, PoE 1 update, and 2 months after that in December, a PoE 2 update, and so on and so forth. This is, of course, ambitious, and this is closer to their original plan for Path of Exile 1 and Path of Exile 2. Obviously, they did not live up to that, and it was disastrous for the Path of Exile 1 fan base, player base, and honestly, the developers. There hasn't been an update to that game in 11 months. This next update is looking like an absolute banger. If you're a PoE 2 only player, I highly encourage you try out Path of Exile 1. It's free to play. It's a very fun game. I'll have some videos about that on my channel, but that's besides the point, everyone. It's just good that the developers have acknowledged that they need to ship the updates to keep updates coming for both games, to keep both player bases happy. And as long as they can follow through with all of this, this is an absolute win. And to everyone saying, oh, an aspirant can afford to be promising, an emperor must keep those promises, meaning, well, they can say all they want, but until they deliver, I don't care. That's totally fair. I will say this interview now has been viewed on my channel alone over 180,000 times. It's the second most viewed video on my channel, not counting the live stream, not counting all the restreams. There's been PC Gamer articles written about it. We were on Steam. We were literally everywhere. Facebook, Twitter, everywhere. This news was blasted across the Path of Exile and ARPG community. There is no way Jonathan would come out and say this so clearly with so much vigor after the release of Path of Exile 2 Early Access, after 11 months of no updates in Path of Exile 1, and not base plant immediately after. They're going to follow through. I am so confident, and I know I am hyper optimistic and positive, but I really believe in Grinding Gear Games and that they are going to make good on this, and we're entering a golden age of Path of Exiles, exactly what we really yearned for when it was announced that PoE 1 and PoE 2 would be split out in 2023 at that second ExileCon. Moving on from that, I asked about the concurrent peak across all platforms for Path of Exile 2, and for 0-1, it was just under 900,000 across consoles, standalone, and Steam. And we also learned that they have not launched in China yet. I 100% thought they launched in China, and a really cool tidbit came out of this because Tencent, the owner of Grinding Gear Games and of Path of Exile 1 and Path of Exile 2 at this point, told Jonathan that when they release Path of Exile 2 in China, they should release it for free because people in China don't pay for their games. They just pay microtransactions, right? And Jonathan told Tencent, no, we are going to release it with a price just like the rest of the world. It's not happening, Tencent. And they conceded. which is pretty darn cool. It's also worthwhile to note that Jonathan has said that Path of Exile 2 has already recouped all development costs just from the sales of the early access supporter packs. That's wild. 7 years of development, already recouped all costs, and that's not counting one of their largest single markets, China. This game is making a tremendous amount of money for Grinding Group Games and for Tencent. It is tremendously successful, and this just puts anti-fuel on the fire that Jonathan is going to be cast out. Jonathan, with his leadership, alongside Mark and all the Grinding Gear Games developers, have created one of the most successful non-Diablo ARPGs to ever exist. One of the most successful games of 2024, and it's in early access. Man, they're cooking. The game's going to be even better in 1.0. Next up, we learned that they hired a statistics expert onto their team, and they have been a tremendous help with them finding some outlier cases in the game, such as the volatile plants debacle, where that was responsible for 50% of all endgame deaths, which is just crazy. This is a statistics expert who enjoys Path of Exile 2, which is something that Jonathan really worried about. He always wanted to get someone like this, but was worried, oh, they're not enveloped in the game, they don't care about the game, they won't be able to make good decisions or find good insights. Well, they have solved that, and they're now in-house, and they're helping them find all these crazy outlier cases, like something we're going to find with item drop rates in just a moment. We then moved on to quite a long discussion on skill balance, nerfs in early access, and buffs in early access, and I can really boil it all down to two things. One, they will not be nerfing anything mid-league in early access unless it's a toll on the servers. It's not going to happen. They're not going to do mid-league nerfs to something like Lightning Spear. And the reason that was given, and I pushed him twice on this, is that players will just not be happy. They do not care if it's positive for the game. They just do not want to upset players. I think Jonathan's exact quote was, "We're not making any friends nerfing things." I really tried to push him on this. He's not budging on it. It's not happening, guys. No more nerfs during early access. They see the negatives of nerfing during early access outweighing any positives that happen mid-league. They would rather do this instead. Buffing skills and various character systems during early access, during mid-league updates, which is something that they've not really been doing yet, but they will be doing with Dawn of the Hunt. 021 is just the start of the patches for Dawn of the Hunt. 022 and 023 are going to bring in some actual skill buffs, ascendancy buffs. Acolyte of Chayula probably going to get buffed during these patches. And what's happening actually internally at the company, he shared, is that there is a team of about 5 people capable of making these balancing decisions, and Jonathan Rogers isn't even on that team. It's a very small council, I called them a cabal during the interview, of people who can make these decisions between Path of Exile 1 and Path of Exile 2, and currently they are working on Path of Exile 1. Once the Path of Exile 1 update is out, they don't do any mid-league buffs or nerfs in that game is released, they're going to move over to Path of Exile 2 and do some mid-league buffs to various archetypes throughout the game. That could be Fire, which we touched on later in the interview, Fire skills. Like I said, it's Acolyte of Chayula, various ascendancies, all these items in the game, they might be getting buffs as well. They've already actually received some that are coming in the patch in the next few days. This is awesome to hear, because if they're not going to do nerfs, the next best thing they can do is buff underperforming archetypes. And I say next best thing, honestly, I'm in the middle ground on this. I know that the community is very polarized on this topic, and a lot of people want the big nerfs and a lot of people don't want the nerfs, and they come at each other's throats. I'm honest, I'm a fence sitter on this topic. I really am. I don't care. I think the best approach is to just raise the floor and make more skills feel fun, make more skills powerful. And that's another point that we got from this discussion here. Jonathan doesn't think it's just a numbers thing that's necessarily wrong with skills in Path of Exile 2. He also thinks skills just need to be changed fundamentally. If a skill doesn't feel good, if it doesn't feel fun, they need to redesign the skill. Buffing it by 20%, 30%, 50%, doubling the damage isn't going to do anything if the skill feels bad. And that's something that they really want to focus on, especially in 0.3, which is the next update for Path of Exile 2. They want to bring more skills up to the main skill stage, right? He admitted during this interview that they focused so much on skills being combo skills and comboing together, and you need to use X skill, then Y skill, then Z skill in order to get W outcome, right? Well, in 0.3, they're going to make more skills feel good solitarily, and then naturally, players will combo that skill with other skills and things will just organically evolve instead of the developers looking at their vision and saying, this is how I want this set of skills to play, and then basically forcing that on players. That's not going to happen. In some cases, of course, it's going to happen, but they want more situations where players just are able to mash skills together, use one skill, and let it just evolve naturally. We then spoke about various methods of skill scaling. I talked about storm mages being lightning based, but not scaling with lightning elemental damage, and whether or not they could open up tags on skill gems to allow for more scaling scenarios. He was totally open to that. And in that exact scenario, he believes they're actually going to add more avenues to scale up those skills, which is awesome. We then discussed weapon swapping and how that feels bad because it's very slow. He agrees, and they're looking to reduce the time it takes to swap weapons. They'll never turn the timer on that to 0 because they don't want it to be instant. They don't want people to just spam skills like disengage or rake on a weapon swap thing. So they're looking for ways to scale weapon swap speed. Maybe it will be skill speed, maybe it will be attack speed, cast speed. They have to figure that out. That'll come with time. And that weapon lock tech that would lock a single weapon when you're weapon swapping. If, for example, you're using a scepter and you want to use that scepter in both of your weapon sets, that lock weapon tech is coming in 0.3. It was teased for 0.2, but it has been pushed for the time being. I then pressed him a bit on whether or not we'll always see skills locked to a single weapon type. And I'm not talking about spells. Obviously, spells can be used by any weapon. I'm more so talking about Falling Thunder being locked to quarterstaffs. I gave the example of maybe you can use that on maces and quarterstaffs. He said, as a default, yes, they are probably always going to have skills locked to a certain weapon. However, there is the possibility that there could be uniques in the future, like a unique mace that allows you to use quarterstaff skills with it, or maybe there's an ascendancy or a keystone that allows you to change up that. But as a default, cannot mix and match weapon skills between each other. At this point in the interview, we talked a bit about Atlas passive skill trees and how it takes quite a bit of time to progress through them. He admitted they missed the mark there, and it was just them not being able to predict really how long it would take people to get through these various things, kind of PoE 1-minded here, where they didn't predict people wouldn't encounter all these things as rarely as they did. And then he dropped this big bomb. The fact that there is a bunch missing in between. There's a gulf missing in all these endgame systems. He talked about Breach at length and how they have numerous Breach bosses prepared right now to drop into the game. They have the skills, they have the skins, they have the areas. They just haven't had the time to fully insert them into the game itself. And you're supposed to fight all these bosses and do all these different encounters before you fight Zesht at the end. And this is how you would progress through that system. Right now, though, it's just grindy. And you're just fighting Zesht to get through. You're just doing the Breach Stone. You're not doing a variety of content. Eventually, all this is going to make it into the game, hopefully by 1.0, and this is going to be the same, I assume, with Ritual, with Delirium, with Expedition, and any future content that comes into the game. They really want a diversity of options here, and they don't want you to feel like that Atlas progression is grindy and repetitive, which is awesome to hear. I poked on the fact that a lot of the game's areas are missing bosses, and a goal from grinding your games was to have a boss in every zone. And I asked if that was still the plan. Again, he shocked me here. Every single area in the game currently already has a boss created for it. Okay, they just haven't had the time to test it out. The models are done, the abilities are done, they just need to balance it out and then drop them into the game. So hopefully by 1.0, again, every single area in Path of Exile 2 is gonna have a boss. I couldn't resist. I also asked him the best avenue to provide feedback and queried why they like bingo cards so much. And Essentially, they like bingo cards because it forces the user to be concise with their feedback and not rant on a bunch of unimportant stuff. It forces them to be very succinct and just put the most important issues in those little bingo card boxes. And on where to post feedback, literally anywhere. The forums, Reddit, Twitter, a video. He likes video essays, especially video essays that get a lot of views. Apparently he listens to them. So noted. But as for other ways to provide feedback, just anywhere, and the community team reads pretty much everything and tries to funnel as much as possible to Jonathan and the rest of the game development team. I then asked about spears and how many people like their mobility and if more mobility options would come to existing weapons and new weapons. He essentially said, spears, they're the most mobile weapons that are going to exist in the game. We want them to have that identity, but there is an upcoming class, a Dex Int class that will have a lot of mobility options. And of course, he's talking about the Shadow, which is the roguish character in Path of Exile, and that is a long ways off. So the Shadow is not the next class coming up. And yes, by the way, I did ask about the Druid in this interview. We then dove into the crafting systems introduced in Dawn of the Hunt, including recombinators, and I asked him, well, how often should the average player be engaging with many of these systems? Have you hit the mark there? Well, with recombination, the goal was 1 recombination per expedition on average. Honestly, I haven't really been able to do that. He also mentioned that recombination is probably the hardest to access basic crafting system. We also dove into the new socketables that are being added with Dawn of the Hunt and socketables in general, and touched on a very controversial topic here, and that is the amount of juggling you have to do with gear when it comes to elemental resistances and attributes. Now, a lot of people encounter this problem wherein, okay, I find this really new cool piece of gear, but if I replace my current piece of gear, I lose a bunch of LE resistances. So if I equip this awesome new powerful piece, I have to swap around all my other gear to get my defenses back in line. And it creates this item juggling problem that is very similar to the socket system in Path of Exile 1 and the juggling people do there with gems. And I brought up this point of friction and essentially asked, are you happy with this? Can you add more options to allow players to manage this so we don't have to constantly juggle all our gear? Now, he really pushed back on this as grinding gear games. For example, there's a system in Path of Exile 1 where you can spend some currency and you can swap one type of elemental resistance to another on a piece of gear. Very helpful there. It sounds like they'd be against putting that in Path of Exile 2, and it also sounds like they still want resistance capping to be a little difficult, because if you allow players to instantly solve that, then your gear chase ends very quickly. Now, I do agree with that in Path of Exile 2, because there's not a lot of modifiers currently in the mod pool for items. It's not like Path of Exile 1 where you have influenced mods and elevated crafted mods and all this other stuff that you can chase. So in Path of Exile 2, I do kind of get it right now. But in Path of Exile 1, which he also said is the case in PoE 1, that you can, once you fix your resistances, items are finished very quickly. I don't agree with that. So I get holding off on it in Path of Exile 2, even if it kind of peeves me. But in Path of Exile 1, keep it the way it is. We also talked about attributes, and I really harped on this one, and it didn't seem like Jonathan necessarily agreed with me, especially with gear. On gems, he did agree that attributes were a bit too high, the cost of using certain gems. I think he said 12%, 12 to 15%. I pushed to like 20%, maybe reducing the attribute requirements by 20% would be a good idea. He seemed to agree on the gem front, but not the gear front. I also almost got tricked by Jonathan. I told him there was a tri-attribute spear, sea glass spear, and he was like, I don't know if there's a tri-attribute spear out there. I don't know about that. But I was right. I was actually right on a mechanical based thing, which is very impressive for me. So summing that up, it sounds like not a lot is happening on the resistance juggling front, unfortunately, despite pushing him on that. With attributes, it sounds like gem attribute requirements will be dropping, but gear attribute requirements will be staying in place. All right, next up, this was a little bit, it wasn't necessarily a dodge, but I didn't press on it as I should have. Next time I will. I asked him about the scaling of uniques and how many of them fall off very quickly, and if they're pleased with the number of uniques that are just used for a blip in a character's journey, if they're used at all. And then Jonathan did reveal some very interesting information, but did not answer my question. He essentially said, well, we have a bunch of awesome uniques in the game, a lot of chase uniques, but they don't drop at all. And a bunch of new chase uniques are being added in the patch coming out this week. But on the uniques that currently don't drop and the drop rates are being buffed this week, well, here's an example. We performed some operations and we discovered that Astramentis, one of the most powerful uniques in Path of Exile 2, its drop rate is currently 1 in every 45,000 divine orbs, which means, and this is Jonathan's words, Grinding Gear Games was in the wrong universe when it came to the drop rate for this item. Nobody was going to be able to use it. When they checked into this, they discovered that there were 13 Astramentises listed on trade, which is insanity. So the drop rate is being buffed massively. And they also explained why this was going on. In Path of Exile 2, certain item types are much more rare. For example, amulets and rings. They're very, very rare. So if there's a unique amulet like Astramentis, the chance of that dropping is very rare because first you have to drop an amulet and then you have to roll it to be a unique item, and then you have to roll it to be an Astramentis. There's like order of operations that happen there. In Path of Exile 1, that's not the case. When you drop a unique, it just rolls from the unique pool, right? I think he said they're changing it to be like Path of Exile 1. I don't know if that's happening in this patch. I don't know if the drop rates are just increasing this patch, or they're making the change where when a unique item drops, it just rolls from the pool instead of rolling item type. Is it an amulet? Is it a spear? Is it a body armor? And then is it magic? Is it rare? Is it unique? Stuff like that. I'm not sure if that's happening, but I think he said it is eventually coming to Path of Exile 2 so that many more uniques are easier to obtain. Like I said, I didn't press him on the scaling of uniques, and that was my bad. In the future, I will make sure to press better and follow up on those core questions. Still a cool anecdote. Okay, here was another awesome reveal from Jonathan. I asked him on thoughts about the baseline movement in PoE2 being too slow. And then he responded and said, well, the baseline movement in Path of Exile 1 and Path of Exile 2 are the same. Obviously, he just means how fast the character moves when you start on the beach. But in Path of Exile 1, you have a bunch of other tools to use, like Quicksilver Flasks and the like, that speeds up your character quite a bit. You get a Quicksilver Flask at like level 4. It's very, very fast. But almost unprompted, he did essentially say, and we know still that you're moving too slow in Path of Exile 2. So I can't spoil anything, but in 030, we have a solution to this. We're currently workshopping it. It might be coming into the game. We don't want to completely destroy the meaningful combat, the vision of combat in Path of Exile 2, but we understand players are moving too slow with their characters. What it sounds like to me is either some sort of Quicksilver charm or flask is coming to the game that's essentially buffing your movement speed by 40%. Based on charges, you just click it and you move faster and you gain charges by killing monsters. Or perhaps there's a sprint coming into the game as well, more like Diablo 2. I saw some people speculating about possibly mounts coming into the game for this reason, and I would hate that. I'm honestly not a fan of the row mount, and I really hope they don't try to solve this with mounts. I feel like that would be an absolutely terrible solution, and I just hope that's just not it. That would be really bad in my eyes. Your character, unmounted, should just move faster in PoE2 right now. Okay, we have 2 bangers in a row here. Actually, 3 bangers in a row. So next we talked about towers in Path of Exile 2 and the Atlas Endgame. And to my surprise, and the surprise of many, Jonathan Rogers pointed out exactly, he just nailed why Path of Exile 2's Endgame feels bad. I posed the question to him that the Grand Project Precursor Tablet, which is a unique precursor tablet that allows you to just use it in a tower and then leap to any map in the tower's radius without being connected, feels really good and helps people traverse the Atlas. Could that be something baseline happening with towers in the future? He essentially said no, he wouldn't be opposed to making it more common, but that probably won't happen. And then he went into an extremely in-depth and introspective breakdown of why towers and the end game feel bad. And it really boils down to two specific things. One, in Path of Exile 2, you always see the content that you're playing in your maps. There's really no surprise. So you know if you're running a good map or a bad map. You know if a breach is going to be in your map, a ritual, right? And if there's not one on your map, then it feels bad. And if you need to map to a tower to then get a breach on your map, that's a whole bunch of busy work. And all that just feels bad. And that's not fun. And Jonathan recognizes that. Additionally, he also realizes that lots of people feel the need to do what is optimal. And in Path of Exile 2's case, it's the overlapping towers, like 3 overlapping towers. If you're mapping and you find a tower, but there's not another tower in range, a lot of people who play PoE2 feel, oh my, there's not another tower. I just need to keep going. I don't care. This is not optimal. I want to find the best thing to do for my mapping experience. He also realizes that that feels bad. So one, there's not enough cool randomness happening because you already know what's going on in your map and there's no feeling of surprise, good surprise, right? And then you constantly feel like you're doing busy work and chores to get to the good stuff, and the good stuff doesn't happen often enough. Jonathan is very aware of the problem with towers, the current Atlas endgame, and they are investigating it. He also stated later in the interview that the Infinite Atlas is not final. If they can't find a solution, if they can't find something that the majority of the player base likes, then they're going to scrap it. They still have a lot of other things they want to try with the Infinite Atlas before they toss it in the trash. From here on out, we asked about the future of Path of Exile 2. Starting with crafting quests. Will there be a basic crafting tutorial in the future? Yes, there will. He's already implementing one. I used my dad as an example. I then asked about the campaign's evolution in the future, what it's going to look like based on all the very polarizing feedback. Jonathan said essentially they just need to find a good game pace, and once they find that perfect game pace, then people are probably going to enjoy the campaign a lot more. And once they have the full 6 acts in the game, that's probably going to fade away quite a bit too. I then asked right here, okay, Acts 4, 5, 6, are they all going to come in at once? Are they going to drop one by one? And he totally shut me down. And I realized, okay, probably can't ask about any real future plans. He's not going to unveil anything. I then poked on fire skills versus cold and lightning skills. I said they feel much, much weaker. Jonathan didn't necessarily agree. He thought lightning skills were incredibly strong, especially in late game, because they just lend themselves to blowing up many monsters due to how they chain and spread across the screen. And fire skills just need their own variation on that. I pushed him a little bit and essentially said, well, lightning skills have electrocute, they have shock, cold skills have chill, they have freeze, and fire skills just have ignite. He seemed to still not be convinced, so hopefully they find a cool way to make fire fun with explosions or a scorch status effect or something along those lines, because with ignite it just scales damage by you doing more damage, but if you're already doing massive damage, is the ignite really going to do anything extra? I don't know. I just hope fire skills are one of the archetypes that they're touching in one of the mid-league patches for 0-2. Then the interview closed out with just a rapid fire section of questions as we were closing out the hour-and-a-half long interview. Asked about the EU server instability. He essentially said they're aware it's not DDoS anymore. It's actually just instability that they need to fix and work on, and the statistics expert is actually helping them remedy this. So they're putting work onto it. They don't want this happening, obviously, and hopefully it's going to get better sooner rather than later. Asked about div cards as well, and if they're coming to Path of Exile 2. They're coming soon, and they're going to have brand new art for Path of Exile 2 only players. These are things that you can collect, and once you get a stack of them, you can turn them in for an item. It's essentially a deterministic way to get certain uniques or currency items in the game. They're pretty cool. I then asked, is the plan to still allow players to log into separate accounts via couch co-op? Yes, that is the plan, but first they want to make sure you can easily hot swap between keyboard and controller. After they get that in, then they're going to go to the multiple accounts on couch co-op. After that, I asked about an opacity slider for chat in game because some people have trouble reading it. They're actually planning on doing a complete chat overhaul for Path of Exile 2, which is exciting to hear, but they keep getting more and more requests onto this chat feature, so it might take a little bit of a long time to get here. Then we discussed passive tree layouts and the timeline on those. He didn't have one. He was checking in with the UI people. He wants them to come in imminently. I briefly asked about Armour and other defensive options related to it coming in the game because he's been asked about this so many times. I didn't want to harp on it anymore because they were just giving the same answers. He essentially gave the same answer. He didn't really have anything to say about it. Then I noted to him that the Hideout music player wasn't working on consoles after players bought it. They are fixing that immediately. Then I queried the option to disable auto-targeting in-game, which spawned a rant from Jonathan that lasted about 5 minutes, in which he talked about this very thing and how they've been discussing it in depth. And Jonathan went to Diablo 4 and Last Epoch and Torchlight Infinite and all these ARPGs to see what type of auto-targeting they use. And the conclusion essentially was Path of Exile 2 uses one type. It causes people to sometimes miss if they're just off the mark with NPCs. And they're working on implementing similar types of targeting compared to ARPGs like Diablo 4. So if anyone is experiencing this, thank Diablo 4 for Jonathan realizing they need to change. They don't know if they're going to make it default, but they are working on adding some type of system in the game that remedies this. Of course, then I had to ask if Jonathan and the team are playing Clair, Obscur, Expedition 33. They are. Jonathan bounced after Act 1. No spoilers, but something happened that caused him to bounce and he has not returned. He instead started playing Doom. He's a Doom gamer, but the rest of the office is really enjoying it, which is cool to hear because, man, everybody is just loving that game. And we closed the interview asking about the Druid. What happened to it? When is it coming? Jonathan literally just said it wasn't ready. Can give no other information. Could not confirm if wolf form and bear form were still coming. He just didn't give me anything at all on this class that I am anticipating with all of my being. And that was the interview. It was Jonathan's only 90-minute window all week long, so I am incredibly gracious that he gave the time to me, to us, to talk about Path of Exile 2's present and future. We got a bunch of interesting information, but I really do think the best info was at the very front, the fact that they're going to 4-month leagues for either game, so we're going to get 6 content updates a year. Every 2 months, we're going to get new content from Grinding Gear Games, and that is super awesome to hear. As promised, some very brief thoughts on how I thought the interview went. Overall, I was incredibly proud of myself. I thought that all the questions were really good. I thought that the flow went well. I thought that Jonathan was vibing. The community reception was incredible. Yes, there were some people who thought that I was not pushy enough, that I was too soft with my questions. I don't think those people communicate with others very often. I do it every single day. I communicate with, people under me, people above me, with my wife, with my kids, with people when I actually leave my home. I think it went really well. I don't need to be super pushy in these interviews. I don't need to be inauthentic. That's just not who I am. I can press a little bit, right? I can ask tough questions, but not do so in a way that causes Jonathan to clam up, right? To all those who supported the interview, who reacted to it, who watched this video, thank you so much. I appreciate you all very much. There's a big patch coming for Path of Exile 2 this week, and a reveal for Path of Exile 1 coming, and I will be doing a stream series for Path of Exile 1 3.26. It's going to be called Path of Exile. We're going to be working out on stream. It's going to be very, very fun. Make sure that you like this video to spread it to more exiles in the algorithm. Make sure you subscribe to the channel to get all notifications about future content. And you should probably watch one of these videos right here on your screen right now, because that would really, really help me out, and I bet it'll be pretty enjoyable to you as well. So, thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful evening, and stay sane, my fellow exiles.